In this video, I'm going to show you how I tattoo 3 different lions realistically. I created the design in Procreate using 3 real photos of lions. I never try to copy photos exactly. Instead, I always strive to customize them individually for the client. Now, I'm placing all 3 designs the way I want them, and then I'll draw a natural curve through the design to give it more depth. Adding a negative effect gives the design better contrast and makes it more dynamic. The size is just right. I prepared the stencil in Photoshop, and there's a separate video on my channel for that. You can find it in the video description. With the thermal printer, I save a lot of time and can easily create a stencil. This is my standard black and gray setup. I position the client's arm on a sterile surface. Then I apply tattoo care foam and shave the area extensively. I use the foam because many clients have dry skin, which can lead to minor skin injuries during shaving. Then I generously clean the area with skin disinfectant. Although it's a small step, it's extremely important for hygiene reasons. Now, I evenly apply stencil stuff and fix my template. Carefully peel it off, and I always let the stencil dry for 10 minutes after applying it so it doesn't smear while I work. I leave the needle protruding 4 millimeters from the module, and I use a size 7 round liner with a 0.3 millimeter needle. I'll show you the template on the left side. It's also right next to my workstation. It's extremely important to always have the template within good sight. It's a very large design, but I still want to finish it today. The advantage is that I don't have to start by drawing thin gray lines. I can start directly with the final shading. I'll start with the small lion at the bottom and try to finish that one first. With the thin needle, I try to directly replicate the ear from the template. Before tattooing a spot, I always apply a very thin layer of Vaseline so that I can easily wipe off the color afterwards. I always try to keep the skin under tension while working to be able to work precisely. I use many different techniques at once for such a design, and since the techniques change very quickly, I can't explain them every time. Therefore, watching closely is extremely important to get a feel for the tattooing process. The techniques I've covered on my channel so far have always been basic techniques, and the transitions in real life from these techniques are fluid. Although the ear looks very black in the reference, I try to integrate fine texture. For me, the basic rule is the more details, the better the tattoo blends. Eyes, in my opinion, look best when healed using pure black because eyes are the first thing people look at when they see a design. For fine texture, I use a medium gray tone and work in the natural direction of the fur. In the reference, I've marked the area with a red circle so you know what I mean. Since a lion's fur can hardly have sharp lines, I also try not to tattoo any. Hence, I make these lines with a zigzag motion. For me, a rule in tattooing is the smaller the design, the more difficult it is to integrate many details. But we're trying here, even though this lion is very small, to integrate as many details as possible. For the nose, I also use pure black. I always try to analyze the skin at the beginning of a tattoo, and based on the insights from the initial shading and lines, I adjust my approach accordingly. Like here, for example, I notice that the further I come towards the palm, the more difficult it is for the skin to absorb the color. So it needs more passes here. Behind this tattoo, there is also a beautiful story. My client became a father a year ago, and on this occasion, he decided to get a lion family tattooed as a symbol of his own family. He came to me with this idea, and I was very pleased. Now I'm switching to a 13 Magnum soft edge needle. This needle is perfect for filling in areas and shading large surfaces. Those who watch my videos already know that this is the filling technique. When filling in, it is important to work carefully and precisely, but also to be careful not to injure the skin too much. When it comes to realistic motifs, it's extremely important to work the edges cleanly, otherwise it looks washed out when healed. One of the most difficult things to explain is that when you compare a tattoo machine to a pencil, you're working on the surface with the pencil. But when you have a tattoo machine with a needle in hand, you're not working on the surface but underneath it. This is something completely unnatural for the untrained, and the feeling for it can only be developed through a lot of experience. It cannot be explained easily because it's an unnatural behavior. It's not logical to draw under a surface, it's illogical, and therefore you have to practice on artificial skin to get a feel for this unnatural sensation. Ultimately, tattooing isn't about explaining something. Rather, it's about developing a feeling for what works and what doesn't. I can show you my knowledge in theory, but it's impossible to understand it without trying it yourself and practicing a lot. You have to sit down and do it yourself to develop a feeling for this unnatural tool like a tattoo machine. Let's move on to the ear of the female lion. Because the ear is considerably larger than that of the baby lion, I can work wonderfully here with a Magnum needle. It can be done really well with the edge of the needle. In the eye, I'm already trying to leave a small dot where I can later place a light spot with white ink, thus making the eye shine. I do this for each eye, even if there is no reflection visible in the reference. In my opinion, eyes just look more realistic this way. With the 7-round liner, I'm again creating fine details on the face. With small, circular movements, you can create a beautiful texture. It's very important in tattooing to understand which needles to use. Changing needles isn't a big deal, so it's crucial to always work with the right tools. Here on the nose, I first create a gray area with the Magnum needle, and then I add structure and details to the fur with the thin needle. I leave the whisker hairs untouched and work very carefully around them with the thin needle. In an oil painting, you could simply draw white lines over the dark areas later, but that's not possible in tattooing, so you have to plan ahead. When selecting a reference image, it's important, for me even one of the most important tips, to choose one with a lot of contrast and details. The success of any realistic design depends on it. I understand the problem that many people want to learn tattooing but can't find an apprenticeship with a tattoo artist. I'm currently thinking a lot about how to best do this online and invite you to give me tips and suggestions on how we can start this project together. I'm aware that learning in a studio as an apprentice is much easier and better, but since many don't have that opportunity, we need to find a way to address this problem. In my opinion, in the end, it's always possible to become so good that there's no way around succeeding. That means even if you can't find an apprenticeship, you can still become such a good tattoo artist that you will succeed. I'm 100% sure of that. So please write in the comments how you would imagine an online apprenticeship and what exactly you would like to know. A lot of tattoo artists attack me and write me nasty messages because I pass on my knowledge, but I have to be honest, I don't care. If people hadn't always passed on knowledge here, we would still be in the Stone Age. I also think fear is never a good companion. You should concentrate on yourself and not on others. So let's continue with the tutorial. For the background, I'm using the scumbling shading technique. Here, I'm not working so precisely because I know that the background doesn't need to be perfect since the main focus is on the foreground motif. Similar to how in photography, there's a blurry background. I don't outline the skin lines with black, but only with light gray, because otherwise the depth in the image can be lost. I use the thin needle to make the fine hair again. You could also do this with the edge of a Magnum needle, but with the thin needle, it's easier to create the curve of each hair. On my worksheet, I've mixed 4 different shades of gray, and I always refer to the template to determine which gray tone to use. So if something is very dark, I also use a very dark gray, and vice versa. If a gray tone looks very light, logically, I also use a light gray. As you can see here, I try to work nicely with the thin needle along the edges. Later, I will fill in the dark area under the chin of the lion, but for that, I will use the Magnum needle again. I will also fill in the mouth of the big lion again with the filling technique and take my time because it should become a solid black area. My brother and I worked on this video for 3 days, and if you enjoyed the video, we would really appreciate your support. Please like the video and subscribe to our channel to not miss any further tutorials. Thank you for your support. Just like with the small lions. I also leave the whiskers free on the big one, and we'll tattoo them in with white later. Working on realistic motifs, the attention to detail is what I enjoy the most. If you look at the nose of the big lion on the left side of the template, it looks very dark, but if you look closely, you can see its details, and I try to incorporate those as well. The easy way would be to just make the nose black, but we want to create a realistic, lively tattoo. So we try to include every little detail. While I was working on the large lion tattoo, the client informed me that the pain was becoming unbearable and inquired about the remaining time for completion. Realizing that I won't be able to finish the lion tattoo today, I need to address this situation effectively. Since the next appointment with this client is several months away, my approach would be to strive to complete as much of the design as possible, ensuring that the client leaves with a visually appealing tattoo rather than an unfinished piece. In such a scenario, I employ the following strategies. I reduce the level of detail and focus on the essential elements of the tattoo to create a solid foundation for future sessions. Additionally, I refrain from tattooing all the white details at once to save time. This is a challenge I've encountered frequently, but experience has taught me to remain calm and composed, knowing how to navigate such situations. Completing a tattoo over 2 sessions also offers significant advantages. Once the tattoo has healed, I can assess the initial work and refine any areas that may require additional attention, resulting in a more polished final product. When resuming work on a tattoo after a break, it's crucial to wait for at least 3 weeks to allow for proper healing and minimize the risk of complications. Alternatively, if the client prefers to continue the session immediately, it's essential to be mindful of their comfort, as tattooing on freshly inked skin can be exceedingly painful. By implementing these strategies and maintaining open communication with the client, I ensure that despite any setbacks, the tattooing process remains smooth and satisfactory for both parties involved. I use the thin needle to make the fine hair again. So far, it's been a 4-hour session, and I'm quite satisfied with the results, but it's not finished yet. I'm going to add some white highlights to the tattoo, so the client has some highlights until we continue. I think we'll need another 2-hour session here to achieve the maximum result. Here's a brief summary of the key points. I always customize designs for my clients instead of exact replication. After creating the designs in Procreate, I use a thermal transfer printer to create the stencil. Hygiene is crucial throughout the process, from preparing the skin to adhering to proper needle techniques. During the tattooing process, I use various needles and techniques to create details and depth. It's important to keep the skin taut and select the right shades of gray to achieve contrast and realism. Additionally, I've demonstrated how I cater to customer needs, such as reducing pain during longer sessions. Finally, I emphasize the importance of attention to detail, communication with the customer, and flexibility in handling unforeseen situations during tattooing. Returning to the online apprenticeship, feel free to comment on what you'd like to see on my channel, and I'll try to incorporate your requests into the content plan. If you want to know about the 7 shading techniques I use and the tattoos I've done with them, you can watch this video here.